Live from Radio Row right here in New Orleans, the big game Sunday, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Donnie Rightside, Kevin Walsh, and John McMullen embedded with the Philadelphia Eagles with Jakib Sports. Love to have you on the show today.
I appreciate it, guys. Great week. We were just talking about it off air. What a run this has been for the Philadelphia Eagles. If they get it done this time, really special if you think about Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts. But, boy, you got to slay the beast. First team trying to get 3 consecutive Lombardi trophies. Kansas City Chiefs are an amazing team, too. So I don't think you could have had a better matchup for Super Bowl 59.
It should be great. And also, because I know you've been around the block with them, but if we do start from last offseason, the changes made from the defensive coordinator to the offensive coordinator to the early season where Nick Sirianni seemed like he was under fire. Talk to me about covering the Eagles from that time at the end of last year, just before the start, where you get Vic Fangio in town, you get Kellen Moore. How was that for you?
Well, I think it's interesting because if you go back to the off season, it was about evolving the passing offense. It was about we need to get more creative. We need to have more motion in the offense, and that's why Kellen Moore was brought in. And you go back to week 5, they had the early bye week, and it wasn't working, to be honest. The early in the season, it wasn't bad. I think they pulled the panic button a little bit too soon, pushed it, because if you think about those first 4 games, A.J. Brown did not play in 3 of them.
True.
You think about the blowout in Tampa Bay, they didn't have A.J. Brown, they didn't have Devontae Smith, they didn't have Lane Johnson. You almost expect to lose that game. You should. So I think it was a little bit unfair to Jalen Hurts, but it's hard to argue since that time where they've become pretty risk-averse on offense. They don't turn the football over. They've won 15 of 16 games. You really can't complain about it. And your point about Vic Fangio, a lot of people would have said this was the worst defense in the NFL at the end of the 2023 season. And he turned them around in 1 year to be the number 1 ranked defense. That, to me, is a story that's undertold because everybody's so hyper-focused on offense.
Absolutely.
Do you feel, John, when we look at this Eagles group and we try and figure out where credit is supposed to go, at times, Saquon's such a star, right? And we know that, and he gets a lot of limelight on him, and he absolutely deserves it. But still there are people who are hesitant to give Nick Sirianni the level of credit where the resume, the active winning percentage, the 2 trips already to the Super Bowl, never under 500, never missed the playoffs. And again, people still seem where if he doesn't win this game, it feels like he's going to then get knocked down another peg somehow.
You look at the AP voting, which I was a part of. Nick Sirianni, I quickly looked at the voting, but I think he got 1 vote or 2 votes.
Right.
Very little when you think, and because the expectations are so high in Philadelphia.
Right.
So if you think about voting for Coach of the Year and things like that, it's always about the guy who overexceeds expectations more than the Bill Belichick's, the Andy Reid's, and Nick Sirianni's of the world, who are supposed to be good. So to your point, I think most people, because of the splash, the sizzle, go to Saquon Barkley, one of the most historic rushing seasons. He's going to break Terrell Davis's record probably in the first quarter on Sunday for all time. So it's one of the greatest running seasons of all time. But if you talk to Howie Roseman and you talk to the people in this organization, it really starts with the offensive line. This is one of the great offensive lines. I was texting with an ex-GM a couple weeks ago, and he was the first one to say it to me. He said, this is one of the best offensive lines of all time. And I started to think about it, and I go, it might be. It might be. And that's amazing considering they lost a future Hall of Fame center and a 6-time All-Pro in Jason Kelce to retirement, and they got better.
It's incredible. I mean, like Donnie, we've talked about it. That's why I've said, not that I'm trying to take away from Saquon. As a whole, I think this group is an argument for the best rush offense ever because of the offensive line, Saquon, and the quarterback's mobility as well, John.
And it's ironic because they finished number 2 in the NFL for the Ravens.
That's right.
Because of Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. They have a good offensive line. Not quite as good as the Eagles, but it's one. But if you guys brought up the Sirianni era, they've always been able to run the football. Miles Sanders was a Pro Bowl running back when he was here. DeAndre Swift was a Pro Bowl running back when he was here. Well, you guys see the some of the big runs. You'll see the 60-yard run on the first offensive play against Washington. He didn't get touched till he was 20 yards down the field. And what Saquon can do that normal backs like Miles and DeAndre, very good backs, they're probably going to get 20, 25 yards out of that. Saquon breaks tackles and he's a home run hitter.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's like Ryan Howard back in the day for the Philadelphia sports fan. He might strike out 3 times and then hit the 3-run home run. That's Saquon Barkley. Always a threat to take it to the house. You might stop him 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, and then bang, 60.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If we take a look, John, at this week, too, because it's nice to see that we're getting sort of a rematch from 2 years ago. What do you think has to change from last Super Bowl to this Super Bowl? Is it simply we have better coordinators, they'll be better prepared? And what do you have to watch out for Andy Reid with 2 weeks to get ready for a game?
Andy's the king of the bye week. Ironically, Nick Sirianni's very good coming out of the bye. He's lost 1 game, and that was Super Bowl 57 with a bye week. Nick Sirianni. And Andy's great. We all know that. As far as the Eagles had a lot of uncharacteristic, undisciplined play on defense. I think people forget there's a lot of revisionist history about the defense and how they fell apart in but it was a really good defense for most of the year. James Bradbury was a second-team All-Pro cornerback. Avonte Maddox at the time was one of the better slot cornerbacks in the NFL. Really good defense. And they just blew coverages in the fourth quarter, which was uncharacteristic. So if they play more disciplined, which I think they will, and that's the strength of Vic Fangio, the teaching, I think that'll make it more difficult for Kansas City, which is, that corn dog motion, I guarantee that's where Andy sort of beat them in Super Bowl 57.
A couple wide open plays.
That will show up again. I think the Eagles will handle it better.
Also, just, John, because I don't mind. We'll see how it all goes, but there's certain legacy moments that I think are on the line. Always, whenever you play in a Super Bowl, Howie Roseman, I still can't believe what happened in April. Where, Donnie and I were talking, you think it's going to be Quinion, you think it's going to be Cooper? Oh, they got both. We were hoping that one of them would still be on the board at the time. And obviously, again, Saquon replacing Kelsey, the trade for A.J. Brown that started this, the willingness to draft Jalen Hurts. And that, did send some dominoes down the line. But, Hurts is now in 2 Super Bowls there. And the job that Howie has done with this group.
Well, Howie's great. Let's be honest. This is a Hall of Fame general manager. His ability to manipulate the salary cap, his ability to bring in players, his ability to take chances, to not be risk-averse. I talked about how they're risk-averse on offense. Building a roster, he's the exact opposite. He's willing to take chances. A lot of that, to be honest, guys, goes to Jeffrey Lurie. Because if you think about most GMs in this league, they don't have an opportunity to do what Howie Roseman does because they're GMing for their jobs at all times, for lack of a better word. So, can you pay a running back what Howie Roseman did? A lot of GMs can't.
Yeah.
But you have to give him credit as well because he's done a tremendous job. If you go back to the Jalen Reagor, that was a turning point for Howie Roseman because he didn't really want to take him. He wanted to take Justin Jefferson, and he was listening more to his coaching staff, who wanted a player more in the mold of, as funny as this sounds, they were thinking about Tyreek Hill, somebody who could stretch the field vertically and horizontally. They wanted a specific type of player. They thought Jalen Reagor, not that he could be Tyreek Hill, but he could do some of those same things. And they made a giant mistake. And Howie at that point said, you know what? I'm getting blamed for it. I might as well take who I want. And since that day, you look at their drafts in 22, 23, 24, especially at the top.
Yeah.
Done a really good job. And they rebuilt this defense. Howie talked to us a little bit, a small group of reporters before he came down to New Orleans. And he mentioned everybody thinks this was a 1-year turnaround on defense. It was 3 years. Started with Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean.
Yeah.
In the drafting. And then you add somebody like Zach Bond. So it's all clicked.
It absolutely has.
Now, we got the big game, John. Since we have you here, how does this game play out Sunday?
I'm going back and forth. Normally I'm locked in by this point. This really is The Eagles have the better team from 1 through 53. They're the more talented team. But you're talking about the greatest coach, greatest quarterback duo in this certainly generation of football.
Sure.
They beat them the first time. They find a ways to win. You look at Kansas City. They're 17-1 guys, and I say that they're 17-2, but they didn't play anybody in Week 18. So they're 17-1. It's hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, but I'm betting against them. I think the Eagles are the better football team. I think they're better prepared, especially defensively. I don't think you're going to see those mental mistakes. I think they're going to find a way to stop the dynasty, stop the 3 consecutive Lombardi trophies. A little bit 28-23 type of game.
There we go. 28-23. You heard it from John right here. Embedded with the Philadelphia Eagles with Jakib Sports Media here, live from Media Row. John, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.